Hey everyone. So for my thesis and for like a few other projects I've been working on, I've been learning about Unreal's Python API, and specifically kind of how the sequencer works within this API. So there's this really helpful forum post written not too long ago about how to call sequencer, how to do like sequencer stuff via the Unreal Python API. And I found it quite confusing because a lot of it doesn't really work the way the other Unreal classes does in terms of Python. This is also my first video, so apologies for rambling. But I thought it'd be cool to make a video kind of going through like a very simple way of instantiating all this shit. So let's read through it and let's go through it, right? So I'm not really going to talk about how to get VS Code work, Unreal talking to VS Code. There's this extension made by this really nice guy that I forgot the name of. There's also like a few certain like troubleshooting things you can do if it doesn't work out on your end. In terms of Unreal, this is basically a pretty empty world. You just gotta enable the Python editor thing, enable sequencer scripting, and then there's like this one other thing, but all available online too. And another thing that I did was in under plugins for Python, you can kind of give it a path, and all the scripts inside this folder would be seeable by Unreal. So that's kind of the setup part of it. But let's get to some Python stuff. So for today, for this video, some of the stuff I've been working on is kind of like, wouldn't it be cool? Click a button, it creates a sequencer, and it renders that sequencer out as a video onto your hard drive. So the steps we can do for this video is like a very simple, very straightforward, bare bones type of workflow. So we're going to spawn a skeletal mesh, spawn a camera that points to that mesh. We're going to create a level sequence, fill that sequence with our mesh and camera, create some animation and camera cut tracks, and then render it out, all with a click of a button, hopefully. So yeah, let's do it. First of all, obviously, import Unreal, the Unreal module. And for this one, I kind of just, there's Unreal's API is quite helpful. It's kind of like Legos, I find, because I don't find myself doing like a lot of actual quote-unquote Python scripting. Everything is kind of just leads to one thing. As you'll see, every class kind of points to another class, and it's kind of all about, it's kind of like putting a big puzzle together, which is fun. But in terms of Python modules, there's two big ones that we're going to use. Let's put this out so it's global. Unreal.editor level library and Unreal.editor asset library. And for these two things, these two classes, you can think of the editor level library as kind of a way to access everything within the world, right? So if we want information, or if we want to grab this directional light, that's what the editor level library is what we would use. If we want, and then the editor asset library is if we wanted to access stuff within our content browser, which we'll do right now. So let's spawn a skeletal mesh. But first of all, let's save all these in variables. So let's say ELL equals that, and EAL, equals this. So to spawn it, let's make it a function called spawn skeletal mesh. And then first of all, we need to find the path of the asset we want to spawn, right? And so this one, let's use a default mannequin. Let's use Quinn simple. No particular reason. So we're going to copy Quinn's path. And then here, let's do Quinn path equals eal.load asset. And then we're going to put in our path name here. And when you copy it, it kind of copies the whole thing over. We only really need this part. And content isn't really called content in terms of Python and Unreal. It's called game. And also we don't need uasset. We just need the exact name of how this file is referenced in our Unreal instance. So after we have that, so QuinPath is a loaded thing. And to prove this, we can even go, let's print the type of QuinPath. And I know this is mostly because I'm new to it, and I feel like there's definitely better ways to do it, but this is a good like troubleshooting way, I find, to like kind of find out what variables are. So there's a few things we need here. First of all, we need to import our actual script, which is called forvid as fb. We also need from import lib import reload. This way, this line kind of just allows us to gives us the ability to kind of reload our scripts instead of having to like close Unreal, open it again, or like manually importing it every single time. So we have this function called spawn sk, and we want to print out what QuinPath is. So let's fv.spawn sk, and we'll see that we have a skeletal mesh here, and it's a class. Now that we have this, we can set some other variables for the stuff we're going to use. So location equals, we need a location and we need a rotation, because we're going to use the editor level library to spawn in our actual thing. And we're going to use spawn actor from object. And this is something you can find in the documentation. So let's type in spawn actor from object. Actually, let's pretend we don't know that this function even exists. So but we do know that editor asset library is a thing, or editor level library rather. So let's type in editor level library, go into it, and then inside here we'll see that it's a utility class that do most of the common functionalities in the world editor, which sounds like exactly what we want. And then in this class, we see that there is a method called spawn actor from class and spawn actor from object. And it kind of tells you all the stuff that you need to put in this method for it to work. And it also tells you the return variable, which is really convenient because all the return variables also links you to kind of other classes Unreal that this stuff is inherited from, which will be really handy once we actually start doing the sequencer stuff. But anyway, let's set the location to Unreal.vector, and let's just put it at 0, 0, 0. Same thing for the rotation. Cool. So we have these two things, and we want to spawn it. So we're going to use ELL spawn actor from object. And why do we use object instead of, I guess, class? We can quickly print QuinPath. We just print QuinPath, save it. And this is what I was talking about when I was saying it was convenient to kind of do the reload thing. Because right now we can just do reload fv, and then fv.spawn sk, or we can just kind of press up and just do the other stuff. And if we print QuinPath, we'll see that QuinPath is actually an object of class skeletal mesh. And since it's an object, we obviously should use the spawn actor from object method, right? So we're going back to the documentation. If we want spawn actor of class, first thing is object to use, location, rotation, and and this transient variable, which to be honest, I don't really know what it is. I think it has something to do with location. Sorry, not location, with memory and how it's stored in your project. But anyway, Quinn path, location, and rotation. And since, as we can see here, transient is set by default to be false, we can just leave that be. So once we have all of that in, go back to our real thing, clear the log to make it more obvious, reload, and spawn. Now see, we got Quinn spawning at 0, 0, 0. How exciting. Cool, so we have our mesh now. I'm going to delete it because we're going to be doing this a lot. So we have this first part done, yay. Now let's spawn a camera that points to that mesh. So let's make another function called spawn cam. And first of all, let's, in order to spawn a camera, we have to kind of save the camera we gotta instance a camera object from the Unreal's camera actor class. So if we quickly search in here, cinema camera actor, we can see that it's a class, and it has a lot of methods we can use, but that we will use. But for now, let's just call it cam equals unreal.cinema camera actor. Get an instance of that. And we kind of, and what we want to do here, right, is we want to spawn a camera for every skeletal mesh we have in the world. And I know right now we only have one, but let's say we have like more than one. So let's try to find all the skeletal meshes in the scene we have right now. So all actors equals EOL. And because this is something we want to do in the level, we're going to use the editor level library. So EOL dot, and there's a function in EOL called get all level actors. And then let's print all actors. Save that. Go back here. Clear that. Reload. And, oh, not that one again, since it's a new function. What did I call it? Spawn cam. fv.spawn cam. Yep, and then it'll return an array of kind of all the stuff that's in the world, right? So we'll see that we have our floor, we have our directional light, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, we got all the actors, but we want to kind of only grab skeletal mesh actors, right? Because we only want cameras to point at skeletal mesh actors. So what we can do is we can have a little for loop. So for actors in all actors, if actor dot get actors dot get class dot get name. And what this is doing is that you're kind of, because we saw here that it returns kind of like this Python object version of all the things in the scene, right? So what this line would do is we're getting the class of that object, and then we're getting the name of that class. So if that equals skeletal mesh actor, then we want to append it to like in a list of meshes. Meshes.append actors. So let's try this out, and then at the end, well, let's print out meshes. See what's in meshes. So once again, erase that. Let's go to our output log, clear that. Let's reload everything. Let's spawn a skeletal mesh in here, and let's run spawn cam. Cool. It returned a, so It returned a object of skeletal mesh actor. Nice. We have all of our actors in an array. And what do we want to do? I guess we can do, after this, we can do another loop of all mesh sk in meshes. Because we want to create a camera that points directly at this guy, right? We can, Unreal has this for skeletal mesh actors. Unreal has, we can find it. Maybe just actor then. Get. I was trying to get bounds. Get actor bounds. There we go. So, an important thing to note, I guess, is that everything in Unreal kind of inherits from this object base superclass. And actor is kind of what lies like maybe two inheritances above it. So basically everything in Unreal will be like either an object or an actor. And in this one we have a get actor bounds method, which, as we can see, if true, it returns two vectors set to half of the actor size in 3D space, and it returns it as a tuple. So if we want to create a camera in our world and point it straight at this guy's face, we can maybe use this guy right here. But I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's try to just create a camera first. So for SK and meshes, let's just create a camera to start, I guess. So we have this camera that's part of Unreal.Cinema camera, an instance of the Cinema Camera Actor class. And same thing as last time, we need to, and since this is an object right now, we can run the same EOL dot spawn actor from object method to spawn this camera since it's an object, right? So same as last time, we need a location, rotation, and for now, let's just set it as 0, 0, 0 again. And we want cam. And because we want to save this camera in a mesh, because we're going to want to put them both in a sequence later, let's also store this in a variable. So camera equals EOL spawn actor from class, and we want cam, and we want the location to be here and rotation to be there. So we have a guy in here. Let's reload and spawn cam. Oh, what's going on here? Cannot nativize vector as rotator. Whoops, rotator. There we go. So if we had more skeletal meshes, it spawned a camera at 0, 0, 0 for this mesh, right? Now let's try to spawn this camera in a place that kind of points it directly at this guy's head. So we can use that bounds thing I was talking about earlier. So let's do, first of all, let's get rid of all, let's get rid of this for now. Less confusing. But we do know that we're referencing this and this as the location, right? So bounds, let's do sk bounds equals sk dot get actor bounds. And I kind of forgot if there's anything we need to put in here. Oops, sorry. So We need only colliding components and a include from child, which is set as a default to false. And only colliding components is, if true, it will only return the bounding box for components with collision enabled. We don't really need that, I guess. So let's just set it as false, huh? And from here, we can remember that it'll return a tuple. And what we want is this second element of this tuple, right? We don't want the center. We want half of the actor size in 3D space, so we can maybe multiply it by 2 to get to the guy's head. So now for location, we can use also, there's another method here called get actor location, and it returns the location of the root component of an actor, which, does what it says. So we can do sk dot get actor location. And since we kind of wanted to we want the camera to face the guy, to face our mesh, right? And we can see that in Unreal, this X right here, this X arrow is considered kind of the forward vector, and this Y will be considered the right vector. So we kind of want our camera to be aligned with this Y vector. So we want to do this plus sk dot get actor right vector. And this by itself would just return a 1 in the Y direction, in the Y. So let's multiply by like 150 to kind of give it some more, make it more dramatic, I guess. And then after that, we want to move the Z up, because right now as this code goes, the thing is still going to spawn in the ground. The camera is still going to spawn in the ground. So we're going to go location.z equals skbounds. And remember, we want skbounds returns a tuple. So we want the first element of this tuple dot z, because it's a tuple of vector, right? So skbound, the first element of skbound would be like a xyz of the actor's bounds. And it's only half of it. So we want to times 2. And maybe we don't want it to be all the way aimed at its forehead. So let's minus 50 as like an offset. And for rotation, just because I know this, it spawns, this camera kind of spawns with this facing the forward vector of the Z. We kind of want it to spawn facing this guy, which is -90. So we'll do rotation equals Unreal dot rotator 0, 0, -90. So cool. Let's save all that and see if it runs. So same thing. Clear the log. Reload. Spawn camera. Let's see what's wrong. Error. sk.get actor location. I didn't call this method. So let's try again. Oh, rotator. Third time's the charm. Sweet. So look, I mean, it's pointed a bit low, but you get the point, right? Now we have an ability to kind of create a skeletal mesh and also spawn a camera matching that skeletal mesh. And since we want it to kind of have share the same kind of index, let's also create a cams. Let's create another empty list. And then we want cams.append camera. So by the end of this, let's print out the length of meshes and print out the length of cams. So let's delete both. And reload, spawn this guy, and then create a camera for it. And then sweet, you both have one element in that array. Cool. So that's 2 steps of our thing done. And let's say calling 2 functions is a little annoying. So let's create a, we don't need this anymore. Let's return meshes and cams. And then let's make a main function that will take it, no. So what we want to do here first is first call spawn sk, and then we want to spawn cam. So now in here, reload, we can do fb.main. Here we go. 1 script. Let's delete those. And then let's save these returns out so we can use them. So let's do meshes cams equals the returns of this, right? So now let's create a level sequence. For level sequences, it's a little more confusing, I feel. So let's do another function called create sequencer. And this time we're going to take in meshes and cams, because we want to create a sequence for the pair of mesh and camera that we have. And to create assets in Unreal, Unreal's Python API uses these things called asset tools. So if you want to create a blueprint, animation blueprint, level sequence, we call this asset tool class using asset tools helpers. So for example, we would let's first make an asset tool equal unreal dot asset tool helpers dot get asset tools. And with this now, we have the ability to create a level sequence equals asset tools dot create asset, because now asset tool is a instance of asset tool helpers and get asset tools, right? And if we go back into the documentation, we have a create asset thing in here. Create asset. And in this thing, what do we need? We need the asset name. We need a path of where the asset would go. We need the class, and we need a factory. And I think a factory, in terms of the Python API, and I guess in terms of C++ too, even though I never used it before, it's just ways. It's just what Unreal calls little modules they have to help create blueprints, animation blueprints, and all the other stuff. So let's create an asset. Let me push this back here. And then, so let's do asset name equals my sequence. And then asset class would equals, not asset class yet. We're on package path to equal, and this will be equal to where you want your thing to go, right? For example, if we want our sequencer to go in this little folder called sequences, will be like this: /game/ lowercase sequences, right? Lowercase sequences, perfect. And then next we need, let's go back to the thing. We need asset class and then a factory. So the class of the asset we want to make is unreal.level sequence. And I forgot if we had to instantiate it. I don't think so though. Unreal.level sequence. Why is it mad at me? Positional cannot after keyword. Oh, right. Asset class equals this. And lastly, we need the factory, which this one just kind of took me a while of looking, but factory what equals to Unreal dot level sequence factory new. We create an instance of that. Okay, and that's kind of all we need. So if we were to just run this now, let's not even have any of this. If we were let's just run this right now. Reload, and let's do fv dot, what did I name it? Create sequencer. You see that we have my sequence. Hooray! Now, how do we do the parts where we add a thing and then we do another thing? That part gets a little, to be honest, a little bit more confusing, but hopefully we can get through it. And the way you attach the things in your scenes to your sequence is through bindings, which I'll show you right now. So let's put this back. We'll take cam meshes and cams. And down here, when we call this function, we're going to want to create sequencer and feed it our array of meshes and cams. What did I do? Create sequencer. Okay, weird. So now, let's add both our things into our scene first, right? So let's do mesh, not meshes. Let's do sk binding will equal to sequence add possessible. And of course, I know this method is a thing because of the Unreal API documentation, because sequence is, well, let's find out exactly what it is. Print sequence type. There's also another way we can find out what class it is. Print sequence dot get class dot get name. Get name. Remember this guy? So let's not use any of this stuff again. Reload, create sequencer, and we'll see that what we have here is a thing of class level sequence. So we know we have we know sequence is a thing of class level sequence. So let's go here and go to level sequence. And then, you know, parse through all of it. Level sequence, here we go. So for level sequence, we can see that we have, level sequence has a bunch, not that many methods by itself, right? So you might be like, oh, well, I can't do anything with this fucking class. What do I do? But level sequence inherits from this movie scenes sequence class, which has a lot more other shit that you can use. Namely, the add possessible thing, which adds a new binding to this sequence that will possess the specified object. And if you guys didn't know the difference, possessible means that if you have a thing in your level and you make it a possessible object of a sequence, you're basically just referencing it. You're dragging that in. While if you do spawnable from instance or spawnable from class, the sequencer will generate a mesh or a thing of that class that you're trying to instance, right? So anyway, we want this one because we know that our guys are already in the scene. So let's do sequence dot add let's name it first, save it in a variable so we can use it later. Mesh binding equals sequence dot add possessible. And remember, the thing we're returning, the thing we're grabbing into this function is a array. So we want, and there's only one thing in the array for now. So we're gonna put 0. Meshes, cams, put that back in. And then let's do camera binding equals sequence dot add possessible cams 0. And let's see what that looks like. Reload. And I think, yep, we were smart and we planned it beforehand. So we should be able to just call our main function and have all this stuff work out. Main. There we go. We have our guy, we have our camera, and then we have my sequence. Yay, with now 2 things in here. So we have 2 things in here now. But how are we going to make this the main camera cut thing, and how are we going to add like an animation on there, right? That's going to be the tricky part. So let's delete everything from here again. Oop, not the floor. We want the floor. Delete, delete, delete. So go back here. That's what we're going to use this mesh binding for and a camera binding for. And that, now that we have these 2 things in the thing, let's make a anim track first of all. And to make an anim track, we kind of need some other classes that's sequencer specific. So if we see here, we have mesh binding, which is a sequence dot add possessible. And if we go to dot add possessible, so apologies, we're taking the sequencer object, we're running it through this dot possessible method and returning this mesh binding object. But what type is this mesh binding object? So if we go to add possessible, we can see that this method returns a movie scene binding proxy object. That doesn't really mean a lot to me, but luckily if we click into it, we can kind of see what Unreal can kind of tell us what this thing is. And a movie scene binding proxy is a movie scene, represents the binding ID and the corresponding sequence that it relates to. But what we want to do here is we want to add a track, right? We want to add an animation track for our skeletal mesh. And we see that this movie scene binding proxy object instance has a add track method. And let's use it. So it'll be mesh binding dot add track. So what does this add track method want? It wants a type of class, and specifically it wants a uMovie scene track class. So I didn't really know what this was when I was first reading about it. That's where this sequencer Python cookbook came in really handy. And through this Python cookbook, I would recommend reading all of it if you're interested in this kind of stuff. But right here, it says adding a possessible actor. Here you go. We want to use that we did right here. For skeletal animations, it'll be movie.scene skeletal animation track. And then if we go back into API, well, let's see what this is first. Unreal class, not very helpful. But in here, let's look at what this thing is. Animation track. And let's paste and go. And here it is. Unreal Movie Scene Optimization handles animation of skeletal mesh actors. Looks like exactly what we want. So let's call it. So what kind of track are we adding? We're adding an Unreal movie scene skeletal animation track. Movie scene skeletal animation track. And we're not instancing it because we see that this method only wants us to tell it what class it is. It doesn't want to take in a instance of the class. So we're fine here without actually having to instance it. And also let's save this in a little anim track variable. And the way sequencer works is that you have tracks and you have sections of the track. You can think of track as kind of just kind of provide a visual example. Oop, let's call main again. We can think of tracks as kind of these things, right? Tracks are kind of just like laying out what you want. And in order to kind of time stuff, and in order to kind of like, for example, we want an animation track. The Unreal UI kind of is nice to us, and it just kind of gives you all the stuff, and it creates the section with you based on the timing of your animation. With Python, you can't really do that. So you kind of have to first lay out an animation track on itself, and then specify the specific kind of animation you want to put on that track. So let's delete all this shit again. Oop. Anim track is this thing, right? And after we need a track, we need a section of that track. So we can start adding in parameters, doing time, and all that stuff. So anim section equals to anim track dot add section. And we can see that this is a thing because once again, let's go back to anim to the documentation, because we'll see that camera mesh binding after we add a track. Let's see what it returns. Add a track. It returns a movie scene track. So let's go into that documentation and add section. Adds a new section to this track. Return type. You know what I mean? This guy was talking about when I said it was like playing like a big puzzle game. So this is the section, and in this section we kind of have abilities to kind of get the start frame, set the start frame, set the range. Otherwise, it's just going to come in as like 0, 0. So let's set the range. Anim section equals anim track dot add section, and let's set the start frame and end frame as variables. Oop. And let's be lazy here, and let's just use the get playback. Let's just use the length of the default sequencer that we created. Get playback start and sequence dot get playback end. And we know this is a thing because sequence is a level sequence. We go back to our thing, level sequence. I hope this isn't really annoying, by the way, me keep going back to this thing. We have a get, it's not here, huh? Maybe it's in level sequence actor. Oh, I'm going crazy here. Get. Where is this guy? When in doubt. Oh, wait. I was searching for the wrong thing. Level sequence. Not here. Let's go into movie scene sequence. Here we go. Get playback. Actually, that's not it either. Huh. Oh wait, no, it is here. Playback. Okay. My bad. Get playback start of the sequence and display rate resolution. We know that this is like a variable we can get from the sequence. So let's set it as that. So we're gonna do anim section dot set range, start frame and end frame. So now if we run this code again, we should now see that we have a animation track that is as long as the sequencer is. So let's clear the log. Where's my reload? Uh-oh. Get playback, because I was stupid. Reload. Yeah, Didn't delete it, so let's overwrite it. Here we go. There you go, see? We have an animation track as long as the sequencer is now. But there's no animation, and we want some animation. So, oop, accidentally made a couple of them there. Let's do the same thing, right? Let's find an animation file. Mannequins animation. Let's do this one. Yeah, this one looks good. So same thing as last time. Let's copy the file path, and then let's load this asset. EAL dot load asset. And same as always, we don't need all this stuff. Oop. Don't need all this stuff. Slash game. And we don't need this one back here. Load asset. So it's loaded, and then in anim section, oh, let's load it after, I guess. Let's load it here, and then in anim section, we can have, let's go back and see how we can add this animation, right? And we have, oh look, it has a property called params of type movie scene scaled animation params. And oh look, sorry. In this param file, we have a editor property saying the animation that this section plays. Perfect. So let's just set it here. So now we can do, oh, let's call this jogging. Anim section dot params, because this is located inside the params. Params dot animation equals jogging. All right, that should hopefully, let's see if it did anything, huh? Let's get this guy out of here. Oh my god, news. I don't read the news. Reload, main. Yo, look at that. Nice. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. But now we just kind of need a camera cuts track, right? Because right now, we don't really have anything that's kind of like, we're not really recording anything because the camera is not really doing anything right now. Delete this. And the camera stuff kind of works very similarly to how all this like animation stuff here did. So let's comment this out. Creating anim track and adding anim to mesh. And now we're going to be creating a camera cuts track. So kind of the same idea. Up here, we added a track called Unreal movie whatever, right? Which calls the class type of the animation. But a camera cuts track is considered a master track in Unreal. So let's go back to our handy dandy level sequence functions, methods. Is it still around here? Yep, level sequence. And then it inherits from that. And right here, we'll see a thing called add master track. And it has a, same thing as the other one. It kind of takes a class type of movie scene. And this one I just kind of looked up. But to make things easier for everyone, let's just create camera cuts track equals, what do I call it? Sequence dot add master track, and it's going to be of type Unreal movie scene camera cut track. And same thing, we're not instancing it because we just want like the actual class itself. And that should do it. Same thing as the other one. After this, we need a camera cuts section, and which will be camera cuts track dot add section. And we'll also do camera cuts section dot set range and make it the same as our sequencer. Start frame, end frame. So let's run it. Clear. Reload. Look at that. Camera cuts track and animation. Crazy. Cool. Now we have to bind our camera, just much like how we bound our animation file to our skeleton. We're going to now bind our camera to that camera cuts track. So let's in camera. And for this one, we need something called a movie scene object binding ID. Because if we, let's see if we can find it. Movie camera scene master track returns this. Because right now, camera cuts section, it's camera cuts track, add a section. So add section returns this thing. So right now, camera cuts out section is this, right? And you'll see in this thing that, let's see if it is in this thing. Set camera, maybe not. Where is it? Movie sign object? Nope. Set camera binding ID. Movie scene camera cut section. Duh. Yeah. You see that in order to kind of set our cine camera to be the main camera in the camera cut section, we need something called a binding ID. And luckily for us, there is another handy dandy class called movie scene object binding ID. And this part really doesn't make much sense at all. Anyway, it's kind of just saying that how it provides you a GUID, which is an identifier for objects to be bound in a sequencer, which is kind of what this thing wants. It wants like an ID. So what you want to do is to first create another variable, camera binding ID equals unreal.movie scene object binding ID. And this time we do want to make an instance of it. So what we want to do is we want to set this binding ID to our camera's ID, which is this one, because we can see that camera, if we can print camera binding dot get ID. And the possessable returns movie scene binding proxy, and movie scene binding proxy gives you an ID. Sorry, that was a really roundabout way of saying it, but remember, this camera binding is sequence, which is this Unreal level sequence, adding a possessable, which is our camera object, and it returns a binding proxy object. And this binding proxy object gives you an ID. But anyway, we want to camera binding get ID, right? We want to camera binding ID dot set editor property And what do we want to set? We want to set the GUID to what? To camera finding dot get ID. And then after this, so right now this thing, camera binding ID, is referencing our camera up here. And finally, to add it, same thing how we did it up here of anim section.params at jogging. We can do camera cut section dot set camera binding ID, and then we'll use that thing we had earlier. Because remember, camera cut section, it's a section, and I'm not going to show you that again. You guys get it. So now, if we were to go back, reload main. Ta-da! Our camera cut, our cine camera actor is our main camera cut actor now in our camera cuts thing. Cool. All in one button. And of course, there's a bunch of other shit you can do with the camera itself. The camera, you can, there's a lot of, I don't know, there's documentation for it. When you spawn the Cine camera, all the settings and the details you're able to kind of preset, randomize, automate in very similar ways. So now finally, I guess we kind of did that already. Let's render it out. And to render it out, we need the sequence path. So after we did all of that, let's return our sequence path. We can do that by getting the path name, using the path name getter. And then let's make a def render, and it'll take a path. And this one's actually pretty straightforward. Same thing with the camera itself. There's a lot of ways you can go in and edit all the shit. But basically what you do is you have a capture setting. So capture setting is a thing that you can fuck with and can make customizable render settings. You want automated level scene capture instance and capture setting dot level sequence asset equals to unreal dot soft object path, and we'll feed it our path. And then let's print out a rendering message. And then let's do unreal dot sequencer tools dot render movie. And we'll feed it this capture settings. That's the default, which is just the default capture settings we have. And let's do, and then right now there's also a callback function that we have to do. So let's just call it. And then let's see if we see what this one does. It's just a bool. Just returns a bool if you did it or not. All right, so all saved and in our main. Let's save that into a path, and then we'll have render path. Why is this red? Oh, S. Cool. So clear the log, reload, and go. Let it run. And if we go into our project folder now, go to save video captures. Look at that. Rendered a video, created assets, and a not created assets, I guess assets. We made a skeletal mesh, made a camera that points to the skeletal mesh, created a level sequence, rendered it out. At one, I say click of the button because you can just put this onto like, an editor utility blueprint and it'll do it. But look at that. Pretty cool, right? And of course, this is just like very bare bones. There's a lot of shit you can do to it. You can randomize it, put a for loop in there, render out like 8 different things at once. But for now, that's it. Thank you.